If you wanted to gain a more comprehensive understanding of why the reality is in the state that it is, of why certain things are going on within a space, you need not look further than the language. This is the crazy thing. This often gets overlooked, but the language is so fundamental to everything that's happening, to everything that we work with, everything that we perceive. And what we have to recognize is that if the language was messed up in a certain way, that would mess up all of the beings. If we were speaking a language that was closer to the core of what the original language was, we would be closer to the actual source of it. Because these words, these letters, the let meaning to extract something, these end up dividing the field in a certain way that creates a certain division within our consciousness and within our reality, right? So, what we first need to understand is the original language came from the stars. All right, and I don't mean like ET being swooped down and they're like, use these words. The stars themselves are a net, a collective of light. And each one of the stars individually is resonating a specific tone, a specific vibration. And when we speak words, when we speak the characters, the stars, we're actually invoking the vibration, the tonality of a specific star. We're literally bringing the power of that star into the space. But that original language of just being the tones that aligned with the stars is not what we're speaking now, right? So remember, the language is like a crystal, it's like a prism within our minds, and the light shines through this prism, and depending on how this prism is shaped, designed, you get a different sort of reality that comes from it. So while it may be alluding to the same tones and vibrations, it's not the same thing. And then within our language, within like the words and the spelling and the letters, all of this is more of a symbolic representation of the language rather than the language itself, because the language is vibration, right? The language is tone. So when we have this English language, it is literally saying it is angle, which is angel-ish, and it is an ish language, so it's not exactly the source of it. And a lot of the modern day languages that we're speaking, it's not just English. English is one of the primary ones because it's a very frequently used, I should say, language on the planet. And a lot of these languages now that we're seeing are often different, but they're similar in the way that they are not tied into the same original language concept. But the Anglish, like the Anglo-Saxon sort of thing, right? The Angle-ish, the angel-ish is essentially a language to make beings this like angel man. That's essentially what it is. To make the angels, to speak the tongues of the angels. And the angels are what? The angels are the servants of God. Okay, now this takes me into another point, because what people often refer to as God in this reality is not the same as the creator itself. Okay, when gods have been referred to in any sort of ancient text, they're not referring to like the all creator being. Okay, so I want to remind you here that these characters, the stars, they are already pre-coded. So if you say a word like say God or something like that, and then you say, well, you know what I'm referring to, it's like you might be think you're referring to something different, but that tone and that specific syllable, vowel, consonant combination alludes to and connects to a specific star within a specific place, which is a specific vibration, and you are invoking that when you speak it. So this is often a problem because we speak of gods, right? And these gods in context were phi-based beings, really. Even the gods of the Bible, like the YHVH, these were phi-based beings. They were not the divine mother, if you will. They were not the creator of all things. So when people are speaking, they're praying to God, they are looking for God, and they're saying, oh, but I mean the all thing, but they're actually using this word God. They're actually referring to a being that comes from the Germanic word Gut, Gudin, which is essentially like this representation of like a gothic being, meaning something that is like it's shadowy, it's dark, and it is a phi-based being, right? Something with arms and legs. It might not be in the living form as it is now, but when you use these words, you're invoking the power that those words are connected to, which is the stars. This is the problem with English. Because like I said, the angel man, the angle, the anglish, this actually connects us and makes us the servants of gods, which in the context of gods in the past, this has always been some act of like We serve them and we praise them and we give to them this act of like externalizing the self in order to give our power away to something that is allegedly higher than us, which has never been the case. That's the soul trap, if you will. And that's why the language English is so problematic and why it was designed that way, right? You need to understand that these words and these letters and the way these languages came together was not random. They were beings that very well knew what they were doing and knew how they could divide the consciousness in a way by having us think in certain ways, by having the language be full of letters that mean the same thing as other letters. So a lot of the letters are just redundancies, but we spell them differently and then we think the words are different. Like when we say Baal, and that refers to literally the word Baal, like the Lord, right? Or when we refer to the Lord, and that refers to actually the lowered, because it's actually telling you that like what you're looking up to is actually not the highest high. It is something that has been lowered. I could go on and on about this, and I will talk more about this in the future, but what we need to understand is that this language is all about dividing us and making us see ourselves as something lower than the supreme being, which is what I refer to God as people call it. Because when people are saying God, people are saying like the Lord, this thing that is higher than me. They're not referring to what they think they're referring, even if they within their intention is completely to refer to something higher, something greater, like this all-encompassing loving energy. It's because the words are powerful and people overlook the language, like I said at the beginning of this video. So when you have people that are speaking a word and not understanding that that word coincides with a specific frequency, regardless of your intention behind it, that's an easy way to get lost, my friends. You might find yourself praying to something and you might have no idea what it is that you're praying to or being prayed upon, right? So you look at these words, we look at the language, we look at how it shapes how we're even perceiving our reality in the first place. When you get into higher dimensions and higher frequencies, things are much less linguistic, right? I'm not saying language is a bad thing, right? I'm not saying it's not useful, because like here I can sit and I can convey this information to you and you can understand it without having to think too hard about the specific words I'm using. But what we have to recognize is that our consciousness is more built on symbology. It's more built on energy and frequency. And these languages are literally just ways to use the frequencies to utter tones and consonants in specific orders that connect us with the stars in specific ways. And a lot of those stars, a lot of those frequencies that correspond with ourself are lost if we're only looking at the language, if we are only going through the linguistics. And this is why it's so interesting that we might think in English, or we might think in our native language and have these specific words coming out that we might not know what they mean or how they're connecting us to certain things, but they are, because that is the nature of the language. That is the nature of language itself. Words and tones are powerful. Now, like I said, this goes beyond just this whole like careful what you say to yourself about your internal dialogue. Like you might manifest this or you might manifest this. We also have to understand how these stars are and their energy. They're like entities in themselves. This is why a star is represented as the pentagram, right? The 5 fingers on your hand, the head, the arms, the legs, the pentagram. In occult traditions, any occultist knows that the pentagram represents a being. So when you're invoking certain beings by using certain words, regardless of if your intention was to do that or not, you are connecting yourself to that frequency. You're connecting yourself to that vibration. So be careful what you're saying. Be careful what you're alluding to and what you might think you are serving, what you might not realize that you're serving because you're alluding to certain things. We might have the best intentions with our words, but if we don't know what we're saying, then we're going to end up getting trapped, because that's how the language was designed to trap us, as the angels, right? The servants of God, which we are beyond gods, my friends. That is because gods are not the supreme creator themselves. The souls that are within you, that is the same essence as the supreme creator, as the supreme being itself, which is that all-encompassing unified force. That energy goes beyond gods. It is beyond gods. And when you tap into that and actually tap into that ascendant version of yourself, what we are within is beyond gods. It is beyond God, because God is something that is the Lord. It is the Lord. It is something that is beneath the all-encompassing, beneath the supreme. And we have to recognize how these words and spells, we spell with words, right? They're casting spells on us to actually keep our consciousness in a subservient form, to keep us in a state of always looking up at something and always looking out at something rather than looking back within ourselves, which is where it all began, right? Be well, be whole, and we'll talk soon. Take care.